Shalom, shalom, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Pulse of Israel here in our eternal and ancestral homeland, the land of Israel. Today, we are back with Martin Sherman, director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, and about one of his latest articles, Jordan's House of Cards, the implications for Israel. Those of you who are unfamiliar, just a few weeks ago, there was reportedly a coup against the king and monarchy of Jordan. So we're going to get into it of what Martin has to say about all of that. Before we bring him in, very quickly, those of you who want to continue receiving our videos of the Pulse of Israel, online censorship is growing. The best way to continue and being updated with all the videos we make is just to go to the website pulseofisrael.com and to sign up for our newsletter. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you. Two other ways to stay connected with Israel and different work that we're involved in, we help out with. One, you can help strengthen the communities of Judea and Samaria, the business people of Judea and Samaria. Very, very simple. I will be giving you the link below with this and find the best package for you to be able to connect and support Judea and Samaria. And finally, another way to connect with Israel is via the online virtual tours of Israel at israelisbeautiful.com. No matter where you are in the world, enjoy Israel, connect with Israel. And so those are all the different ways. All right, let us bring in Martin Sherman. Shalom,
Hi.
Shalom. How are you?
Shalom. I'm well, thank you. And shalom to all the viewers.
It is always a pleasure speaking with you, Martin. And this time, looking forward to your insights. And if you even want to give us the details of what we know, because I don't know if we know everything that actually happened in Jordan about the potential coup within the monarchy against the king of Jordan. What happened and how should we view it as here in Israel? Good for Israel, bad for Israel? What are our concerns?
Well, there seems to be a lot of uncertainty. Anyways, I think the details are not that important. What is important is what this really foretells, because it shows that something we've known for some time, but this is perhaps increased, that there is a distinct possibility that the current regime, the Hashemite monarchy, is not a durable good. I think the working assumption that the Israeli strategic planners must adopt is, in fact, that the Hashemite kingdom has a limited shelf life, whether it's actually toppled or whether it's become so weak that it merely becomes a puppet regime for more radical elements. This is extremely important for Israel because up until now, for all the criticism we may have of the Hashemite regime and its participation in the Six-Day War in the attempt to annihilate Israel, basically for the last few decades, it's been a relatively calm frontier. It's the longest frontier that Israel has, and it's the frontier along the narrow dimension of Israel. And it abuts the strategically critical territory of Judea and Samaria, aka the West Bank. So it matters very much to Israel strategically what happens east of the Jordan. And although some people are optimistic that some successor regime may be benign towards Israel, I think there's not much on the ground that supports that contention. And Israel must gear for a situation where it may have a hostile neighbor on its longest border, along the narrow dimension of the country, and abutting the strategically important highlands of Judea and Samaria, which, if anyone needed another argument to oppose a Palestinian state, here you have it. Not only what might go on in Judea and Samaria, but what might go on in Jordan. And Israel might find itself, if it did ever establish a Palestinian state, it might find itself with a huge stretch of hostile land, stretching from the fringes of Greater Tel Aviv, Petah Tikva, Ra'anana, up until the Iraqi border, which is a pretty daunting prospect. So I think what this has underlined, more important than the details themselves of who said what and what they actually meant, and whether the Hamza was actually behind a coup or just wanted to arouse legitimate criticism of the regime. The fact is that the regime, they felt, lacked the confidence so much that it had to incarcerate him or put him under house arrest. And I think this is a sign of the weakness of the regime, which of course is understandable in many ways. It's suffering dire economic problems. Its infrastructure is crumbling. Its social welfare system is under immense pressure, especially with the influx of refugees from around the area, from wars in Jordan's neighbors. And there's apparently a very severe COVID outbreak as well. None of this is good news for the regime, and it certainly should put Israel on guard.
Just to give people a deeper understanding of why the situation in Jordan is so precarious, just to take a few steps back, very few people know that the Jordanian monarchy, the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, are actually occupiers. They are not native to the land. They're actually from Saudi Arabia. They were given Jordan as a prize by the British. They picked up from Saudi Arabia and given a thank you gift for helping the British, and that land was supposed to be given to Israel. So they were illegal occupiers of that land who are now in charge. The majority of the population are either Palestinian Arabs, because they either lived there as Palestinian Arabs when it was still Palestine, or refugees who ran away because of the 1948 War of Independence, where the Arab leaders made them leave their homes and they ran away to Jordan, or there's a Bedouin population. So there's this, it's a ticking time bomb that I know I've been talking about for years. It's only a matter of time before the Jordanian monarchy, this outside monarchy that really has no claim to the land or even to be ruling over the people who actually live there, only a matter of time that they will fall. Do you not think that Israel, and again, I've been talking about this for years, do you not think that Israel has a strategy, plan of action for the day that it does fall? Or is Israel, together with America, just doing everything it can at every turn to just continue propping up the Hashemite kingdom because it's the best thing and they don't even want to deal with a potential alternative?
Well, if Israel has a strategy to deal with this scenario that we've traced out, it's certainly a well-kept secret. I don't know anything about it. But as I said before, the whole tide is turning against the monarchy, because before, when it could rely on the support of the Bedouins and the tribal leaders, so that he was more popular with the tribal leaders than the king himself. So the king has got a very narrow power base there. He may still control the army, but who knows? Hamza apparently is a very charismatic character. He's in the army as well. He looks almost the splitting image of his father Hussein, who was a well-admired person in Jordan. And the whole thing, as you said, I mean, the most surprising thing about the Jordanian regime is that it's held out for so long. With the odds stacked against it as it is, you would have thought it would have fallen long ago. As I said, its working assumption must be that it has a limited shelf life, even if the shelf life is longer than anyone expected. But at some stage, this medieval regime in the age of the internet and Facebook and Twitter and all, is an anomaly which is very difficult to see how it will sustain itself, especially with the population content, or at least not too dissatisfied, to rise up in revolt. Strategic territory of Judea is extremely important. It doesn't give up the territory, because if it does, it could be from Judea and Samaria. You control, with weapons being used today from territory relinquished by Israel, virtually all the every walk of life within the heavily populated coastal plain, whether it's the only international airport and the main runway, which is clearly visible from the highlands, whether it's infrastructure systems and installations like power generation, or water conveyance, even our desalination plants are easily visible from the Trans-Israel Highway, which runs in many cases adjacent to where the border of some prospective Palestinian state might be, making it very easy to disrupt traffic from north to south. So there's virtually even Israeli Air Force bases would be visible, and the runway is easy to disable. So it would be a nightmare scenario if anything remotely resembling Gaza would arise in Judea and Samaria. So you'd have a mega Gaza overlooking the fringes of Tel Aviv and making Netanyahu basically Sderot on the sea. So it's almost impossible to overemphasize how important this territory is for Israel, and how imprudent any thought of handing it over to Palestine, to Arab rule, especially given the precedent. Every time Israel has withdrawn from territory, it's been used as a platform to attack Israel, whether it was in northern Lebanon, whether it was in the Gaza Strip, whether it was from the cities of Judea and Samaria, and even the Sinai now, which is ascending into a terrible place with the jihadi gangs, and which the Egyptian army is finding very difficult to deal with. So relinquishing land in the hope of attaining peace in exchange has been disproved time and time again for half a century.
Right, and here I just brought out a map, a graphical map. So here is Jordan. Here's the Jordan River and the Dead Sea, basically the border between Jordan and Israel. And here, this dark area are the mountaintops of Judea and Samaria, with the sea coast of Israel. So if there would be a Palestinian state, it would be up here in the mountaintops. And what Martin, what you're referring to is, with Jordan falling and potentially becoming a terror state or a terror supporting state, and connecting to Iraq, then basically be able to have all these foreign enemy forces that can come all the way up on top these mountaintops and fire down at the sea, at the coastal area of Israel, where we would be a very dangerous situation.
As you can see clearly on your map, it's the only topical barrier between the Jordan Valley and the heavily populated coastal plain. And anyone who controls those heights can control with very primitive weapons the whatever goes on in the coastal plain, and disrupt at will any socioeconomic routine within the country.
Thank you very, very much for insights issue. And specifically on this, again, as you've spoken, as I've been speaking about for years as well, it's only a matter of time before the Jordan monarchy falls. It's an unnatural leadership for that landmass, and Israel always has to be prepared. And like you say, this is one of many reasons why it's impossible for Israel's safety, for Israel to think of relinquishing any land within Judea and Samaria, and us not remaining as the sovereign, not only for our historic and legal rights, but for our security rights, as our security needs as well. So thank you so much, Martin.
Okay, thank you. And just before I go, let me just point out one point: is that it's not only necessary. It's not only is it dangerous if the regime would fall, but if it becomes so weakened that it's taken over, or at least control, even if it stays formally in power, it can be the puppet of more radical elements as well. So it's not only if it falls, but if it's taken over by radical elements as well. But I apologize for squeezing that in.
No, thank you so much for that very, very important clarification. I appreciate you adding it.
Okay, thanks for the invitation.
Always a pleasure, Martin. Until next time, keep up the very important work.
Thank you.
Everyone, I hope you enjoyed the insight from Martin Sherman. Again, Martin is the director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. Really important information he's putting out there. So today, talking about the situation in Jordan, the precarious situation in Jordan, and what Israel has to do to look after our best interests because of potential problems with our next door neighbor, and which, as Martin emphasized a number of times, is the longest border with Israel. So if you thought this was helpful, please share this video. And again, just signing off for another episode of the Pulse of Israel here in our eternal and ancestral homeland. This is Avi Eglon. Thanks for watching. Shalom.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.